Hi, Mr. Marshall. The purpose of this meeting today is to discuss Rebecca's most recent evaluation reports. Every 3 years, students with disabilities are reevaluated to see if there are any changes in their academic scores, their IQ scores, just to see if there are any changes. So Rebecca's most recent report, one of the first tests that were given was the Reynolds Intellectual Assessment Scale. This is a measure of IQ and can be given to anyone ages 3 to 94 years old. So an average score on this test ranges from 90 to 109. And so on the verbal index, Rebecca scored a 74, which is below average. On the nonverbal, she scored a 75, which is also below average. And those two tests make a composite score of 71, which is also below average. However, if you look at her memory index, it's a score of 91, which is average. So her overall intellectual ability falls within the below average to low average range. Her composite intelligence score of 71 is ranked at the 3rd percentile, indicating that she performed at or better than 3 out of 100 children her age. And the verbal intelligence is a measure of verbal reasoning, vocabulary, language development, and overall fund of general information. The items that compose the subtest of this index are presented verbally, and the examinee articulates their responses. So her score was a 73, which is the 4th percentile, which is a below average range. The composite memory index provides a summary estimate of verbal and nonverbal functions in general. So the items on the verbal memory task assess the ability to encode, briefly restore, and recall verbal material in a meaningful context that is clear and evident. The items on the nonverbal memory task assess the ability to encode, store, and recognize pictorial stimuli that are both concrete and abstract or without meaningful reference. So Rebecca scored a 91 in that area, which is on the average range. Another test that Rebecca was given is the Woodcock-Johnson Test of Cognitive Abilities, 3rd edition. Now, the GIA is another form test that measures IQ, and so according to this one, her IQ measured a 72, which is below average, which goes right in hand with that the last test, the Reynolds Intellectual Assessment, that scored her IQ at a 71. So those are really close together. Now on this test, her overall score, the IQ score was a 72, which is the 3rd percentile, which means she scored at or better than 3 out of 100 people at her age range. And the verbal ability cluster of this is a makeup of Rebecca's scores on subtests. The verbal comprehension measures language development, includes individual words and comprehension of relationships among words. And her score was a 90 in that area, which is the 25th percentile, which indicates that her verbal ability is in the average range. The thinking ability cluster of this test represents a sampling of the different thinking process that may be evoked when information in short-term memory cannot be processed automatically. The cluster includes one test from each of the 4 thinking abilities: long-term retrieval, visual spatial thinking, auditory processing, and fluid reasoning. And her score in this area was an 84, which is the 15th percentile, which suggests that her thinking ability is in the low average range. Another test that Rebecca was given is the Woodcock Test of Achievement, the 3rd edition. Now this is administered to provide standard scores in the areas of reading, math, writing. So in these, so an average score is, you think of it as a 100. So average of 100, and on these tests, 15 points and 15 points. This whole area is average. So from 85 to 115 is average. So anything below 85 is below average. Anything above 115 is above average. So that 85 to 115 is average. So in the area of brief achievement, Rebecca scored a 77, which is in the low range. In broad reading, she scored a 72, which is also in the low range. In broad math, she scored a 60, which is in the very low range. In basic reading skills, she scored a 93, so that's between the 85 and 115, and that is considered average. In brief writing, she scored a 69, which is considered very low. In academic skills, she scored a standard score of 73, which is also considered low. In academic application, she scored a 64, which is considered very low. In letter word identification, she scored an 84, which is below average. But you know that 85 is average, so she's just right there below that. In calculation, she scored a 69, which is very low. In math fluency, she scored a standard score of 74, which is also considered low. In spelling, she scored an 82, which is just below that average line. And then in passage comprehension, she scored a 73, which is considered low. In applied problems, she scored a standard score of 75, which is also low. In writing samples, she scored a 70, which is considered low. And then in word attack, she scored a standard score of 103, which is considered average. So according to this test, Rebecca's strengths are basic reading skills and word attack. And the word attack can be nonsense words like feb, but that she can break it apart and make it sound. So feb. She's not recognizing the word. It's a nonsense word that she has to put together. Some of her lower areas, they included brief achievement, broad math, brief writing, academic application, calculation. Another test that she was given is the behavior assessment system for children. This test is given as a rating scale at school, and it was with you to do for how she acts at home. And so some of these scores compare, but sometimes we see a difference because sometimes students act different in different settings, or maybe the teacher is harder on the student than the parent is, or vice versa. So we kind of have to take an average of these scores or make recommendations based off the setting that the student is in that particular setting for recommendation. So at home, some of the concerns that you had were anxiety, internalizing problems, and then some of the areas of concern at school included attention problems, learning problems, atypicality, school problems, leadership, study skills, and functional communication. Now, some of those, like the leadership, that may be higher at home, whereas at school, she's around a lot more people her age, and she may just lay back and let other people take control. Does she step up and tell people how to play the game, make sure everybody's following the rules, doing what they're supposed to. The study skills involves those work habits. What is she doing on her own to improve her skills? How does she work alone independently? So those are some of the concerns that she had at school. Another test that she was given is the Connors 3 rating scales. And this is the same. This was given to you to do at home and her teacher to do at school. So some of the concerns that you expressed were inattention and learning problems. And some that her teacher at school expressed were inattention, which is the same that you expressed. The teacher also expressed concern for learning problems for Rebecca. Some other areas of concern for the teacher for Rebecca were executive functioning and ADHD, predominantly inattentive type. These scores were quite a difference. So this may be something that we want to look into more. This could be an area of concern for Rebecca, but it also could be that maybe at home she's more reserved, and through all of this I hear that she is a social butterfly. She loves interacting with people, and so I just wonder if maybe some of that is just coming out. She's just excited to see all her friends. She's excited to talk to people. So that would be something that we need to look more into. Another test that she was given, it's another rating scale. It's called the Adaptive Behavior Assessment Scale, second edition. And it's used to assess adaptive skills and social skills. And so it also evaluates daily living skills. And so, at home, you express concern in functional academics, practical skills, community use, and self-care. And then at school, her teacher showed concerns for her in the areas of conceptual, communication, functional academics, self-direction, practical, community use, and self-care. So you both scored Rebecca with concerns in self-care, and that's does her hair look brushed? Does she brush her teeth? Does she know she needs to take her baths? Is she washing her hands after going to the bathroom, or washing her hands before she eats? So that kind of stuff that you both see at school and at home. Self-direction is she doing what she needs to do even if she's not being told? Does she know that she needs to have all of her materials ready before the lesson starts? Does she know how to get from one place to another in the building? She was also given scores of, test of visual and motor integration. On this test, she scored a standard score of 78, which is in the 7th percentile. And this indicates that her visual motor skills are in the below average range when compared to other children her age. If a child does poorly in this, it could be because he or she has inadequate visual, perceptual, and or motor coordination abilities, but has not yet learned to integrate or coordinate these two areas. However, I wouldn't say that this must be a big problem for y'all because she's never had occupational or physical therapy. So these scores kind of show in the low average range, but for day-to-day life, that doesn't seem to be as big of an issue. She was also given the Brigance Basic Skills Inventory, and this is another academic test, but this shows what grade level she's performing at. So in all areas, she was performing at a first grade level. So you can see these areas here: word recognition, reading vocabulary, reading comprehension, math computation, math problem solving, spelling, and sentence writing. This was given at the end of last year. But according to Rebecca's teacher on Moby Max, she told me that she was already performing on Moby Max at a third grade level in reading. So that's quite a bit of a different jump there. So Rebecca's teacher will do this again at the end. I think she's up for reevaluation. So she'll be doing this test again very soon. And so you'll be able to see the difference in those scores when they go over those reports with you. Another rating scale that she was given was the Adaptive Behavior Evaluation Scale Revised Second Edition. And on this one, the school the teacher showed concerns in the areas of communication, functional academics, self-direction, home living, and then the home rating. So you showed concern as well in functional academics and in self-care. So that's, like I said, what is she doing at home? Does she want to take a bath? Does she want to brush her teeth on her own? Is she being clean, brushing her own hair, starting to pick out her own clothes? So after observing Rebecca and comparing the different assessments, there only seems to be a little discrepancy for me. Her evaluation tests haven't been done since 2011 besides the Brigance, which is up to date. So I'm very interested in seeing how her achievement test and her IQ test vary We don't always see a big change, but I am interested in seeing what those changes are. The rating scales were done in 2014, so that's also going to be a big change. I've heard some stuff from her teacher this year, and what I've seen from the rating scales and what I've heard from you, there seems to be some better areas and maybe some lower areas, so that'll also be something that I'm interested in seeing. She is up for reval, and they're going to do a full evaluation on her again, so we'll be able to see these changes. Her overall intellectual ability falls within the below range to low average range. Her visual and motor and visual perceptual skills are in the below average range, and her motor coordination is in the significantly below average range. And like I said, these were done in 2011, so there could be a very big change in many of these scores. Her processing speed and working memory are significantly below average range. Her overall visual and verbal memory are in the below average range. She demonstrated a relative strength in her delayed visual memory, which suggests that she needs time to process and encode information into long-term memory. So this involves if she were learning something at school, that they go over it multiple times, not just necessarily one day, but if it's a fact that she needs to know, they're reviewing that fact every day for weeks, and then she's starting to store that into her long-term memory. Her overall brief achievement, broad reading, and academic skills are in the below average range. In addition, her basic reading skills are in the average range, and her broad math is in the significantly below average range. Some of her strengths include memory for faces delayed, peer relations, word attack, and that word attack were those nonsense words, basic reading skills, social skills, verbal abilities, verbal comprehension, leisure, and getting along with others. And according to her teacher, that is definitely one of her biggest strengths, but it's also starting to get her in a little bit of a trouble because she's wanting to seek attention from others, which is one of her weaknesses. Some other weaknesses include auditory attention, inhibition, inattention, broad math, brief writing, academic application, math calculation, leadership, study skills, functional communication. And so Rebecca, based off of these scores and her IQ testing, most of her scores are below average range. And so she has the diagnosis, the disability of intellectual disability. And intellectual disability usually falls, the IQ falls 75 or below. And if we look back at Macy's score, if we look back at Rebecca's scores, for both IQ testing, one IQ, the composite index was a 71. And the other, the general intellectual ability, was at a 72. So those are both below 75, which qualifies Macy for the diagnosis of intellectual disabilities.